Hi everyone, Jill from the Northwoods. How are you doing? It's kind of a cold Sunday right here. Hope you are doing well and having a good week. Like I said, I've been going up and down these 2 pounds for ever since I went down in dose. And so today I'm up 2 pounds. I bet you tomorrow I will be down 2 pounds. So today we're up 2 pounds. So apparently I have gained 2 pounds. I still believe in the end it's water weight. I don't think that is actual weight. My clothes still feel the same, and so that's okay. Some interesting news in the world of so my insurance changed over. It's kind of weird. In California, which is the holder of my insurance, Blue Shield and Blue Cross are divorced from each other or something like that. And so before I had Blue Cross Blue Shield, it was covering Monjero, and now they decided that if you are under 30 BMI, they don't want to cover it for weight loss anymore. And I'm sorry, under 40 BMI, and I am 30 BMI and under that. And so they said, oh, we won't cover this. Yeah, I went to the pharmacy to pick up my dose this week. And they said, oh, we're not going to cover it. You have to get into the program. So I called the insurance's number, and they put me through to a third party that signed me up for Eli Lilly's Monjero card, which gets a discount, which I assume is that the price went from $1,200 a month to $350 a month that was announced last year. So, okay, fine. I go back in, I pay for it. They say, here's your copay. It's $25. Fine. And I just got a notice right before we went live with the show that it said, oh, you don't have prior authorization. And I had talked to my doctor about that, and he said, well, you're diabetic. You don't have to worry about that. I know many of you have had to worry about that. And many of you out there have lost their Monjero coverage or Zepbound because insurance companies don't want to cover it for weight. They cover it for diabetes and other issues, but you have to have some other, issue going on. And my doctor said, well, you're diabetic. That's not an issue. So I think we were okay, but I will drop him an email and, just see where that goes. But I think it's going to be all right. And even so, if they told me they weren't, going to have me be on this drug anymore, I'd have to titrate off, right? So we'll see. And then, if they did decide that they didn't want to cover it anymore, which I knew was a possibility when this insurance changed over, that, would I go then to compounding, or would I just try to drop off entirely? I don't know. So we'll have to see where that is. My friend is into compounding. She's had great results with it. She's found good companies with it. And now she's starting to get into peptides and stuff like that. So, there are options out there if my insurance decided not to cover it anymore. It's hard. I understand it. What if I'm not trying to be scary or anything, that I could live, 400 more months. And if this is going to be even $350 a month, before it was $1,200 a month, but now that if it's going to be $350 a month, it's expensive, and I understand that, and I'm not someone to blame insurance companies. I think it, in some sense, is very short-sighted, because imagine if they never cover my Zepbound, and I'm back into the mid 200s. My knees were going. The diabetes was getting worse. My blood pressure was elevated. My cholesterol was elevated. And who knows? I was having inflammation problems. I mentioned that my skin was having this massive inflammation response. I didn't know what it was caused. The skin doctors thought it was an allergy, a skin allergy. But you know what? As soon as I lost the weight and started on Monjero addresses inflammation, and that went away. I haven't had any skin problems either. So it's like, if you don't cover it, it's possible you're going to cover a lot more other things, including knee replacements and heart disease and diabetes and all those things. So I think it is a bit short-sighted not to look at it, but I do understand that it is a pricey drug and there are other treatments out there. So that's kind of the news of the week. Like I said, I think everything is going fine. I'm not having any problems on 10.0. I don't feel any side effects, nor the Diet Coke urge didn't come back. I like I said, I wasn't a big food noise person. I was more of an impulse eater more than anything else. And so that's true. And then starting tomorrow, the new exercise program is going to come in. I will talk about that in future weeks. But I think I'm going to start working on Tabatas. There is this new kind of research out there that has been talking about Tabata-ish like exercises and how doing those very short periods of time for cardio every day really good for you. So I'm thinking about right now in the middle of winter, because once we get into the warm seasons, I'm going to be out hiking more. I'm still hiking. My friend and Em and I go out bird watching still. And, so we're still more active than I am in July because it's hot in July. But once, spring rolls around, which should sort of be at the end of March, I'll be more active. But during that period of time, I want to come up with some kind of a program that I'm going to do more regularly and, get more cardio in. I already do resistance training 3 times a week. So anyway, that's kind of the update in me and how I'm doing. I hope you're all doing great and whatever adventure that you are on. I was kind of getting involved this week in talking a little bit about processed foods. And processed food is a complicated topic. And not only that, but there's so much information both directions. I was watching this interview with Jillian Michaels interviewing Dr. Lyons, and she writes a couple of books about staying young forever. And her next book is coming out on January 27th, and I'm going to read that book. Sounds pretty solid in that. But she, just talking about different things. Like people will say, oh no, you need a high protein diet, which I believe, right? High protein diet. Oh, but don't let it be meat proteins because that will give you a heart attack. Well, okay. Will it? I don't know. Or do I eat good, protein meats out there? Hey, Zoe, it's great to see you too. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you being there. And then it turns out there's a big long story about how the person who came up with the idea about that all our meats and our proteins should be plant-based was an economist who was crunching numbers, and he was a vegetarian. And so he had some interests in not promoting meat protein, so do we believe him? What do we believe anymore? And it's hard because it changes all the time. Because, eggs are good for you. No, eggs are terrible for you. My doctor is still in the camp of eggs aren't good for you, more than, on occasion. And the idea is, do we get high cholesterol from eating cholesterol, or do we get high cholesterol from being overweight? And, there's a whole bunch of debates out there, and you're trying to sort of solve this through, and we're not going to solve all the problems, but talking about processed food, what it is that, that we're supposed to eat, and how are we supposed to read labels, and what are we supposed to trust? And all we can do is, do the best we can with the knowledge we have right now, because it does change quite a bit. And what exactly is processed foods? I know I've talked to friends of mine, I said, I, for the most part, have given up on what I call processed foods. But what does Jill call processed food? Jill calls processed foods that I go into a grocery store and I can't read the label because it looks like a chemistry test. I don't even know what that stuff is. And so that's the food that I really try to avoid. I try to eat foods that I could recognize on a farm. That's primarily the idea, that I'm really trying to just eat foods that look like real foods. But the problem with it is, and so people will say, oh, well, don't eat processed foods. And it means different things to different people. And essentially what processed means is it's just not the original form that it came off of a tree or out of the ground. Technically, washing produce is processing. Freezing berries or turning into jam, processing. Grinding wheat beans into flour, processing. And cooking any food is processing. It's interesting because they were saying that what's different between us and the animals is the animals can eat raw food and they have a longer digestive tract. They have a higher stomach acid, so they're not as damaged by spoiled food than we are. And because our food is cooked, that means it is already processed, which means it is already processed how our bodies, animals would have processed it. It is already coming to us pre-processed. So we do expect as human beings to have pre-processed foods. That's just how we do. But the question is what is overprocessing? That's the real question. What is it that, turns food from being okay for us to being bad for us? And so it's a good conversation to have. And you'll hear a lot of doctors and a lot of videos talk about minimally processed foods. And those are going to be things that are processed, because we talked about freezing a fruit or a vegetable, processed. But minimally processed would be eggs, frozen vegetables, milk, plain yogurt, rolled oats. That's they're processed, but they still have all the nutrition that you would expect in them. Flour, and buying packets of nuts and seeds. Some of them have a little salt added to them, but they still contain the fiber, the protein, the nutrition, the structure of what they were when they came out of the ground. They're still digest at a reasonable pace, and they still signal in our body fullness. And an egg is a perfect example. So if you take it, you wash it, refrigerate it. I don't know. I don't wash my eggs. Do you wash your eggs? Anyway, but it's still an egg, right? But then we just can't eat an egg because it might not be good for us. So we have to cook it in some ways. Minimally processed, or, some foods that are processed would be like bread and cheese and pasta and sauces. And they're not automatically unhealthy. They become more problematic when the processing strips away the fiber. The sugar is added and is doing most of the flavor's work. There is high saturated fat in there, or there's monosaturated and all these other types of saturated fats. And the proportions become disconnected from how much we should eat in order to be full. I know you've probably been there like I have, where you get a package of something and you look at it and it will, like if you get cereal, right? And you say, oh, I'm going to eat some cereal for breakfast. A serving is like a cup of your hand of, not much. It's like 30 grams or something like that, which isn't much. That's a serving. And nobody eats usually what a serving is. I kind of appreciate it when I see food in the grocery store. Like I get some pizzas that's locally made around here in a package, and it says they're kind of, I guess, 9-inch pizzas, and it says that a serving is half the pizza. So it's at least not trying to reduce the size of the serving so it looks good. I can appreciate that a little bit too. So then comes in the question about ultra-processed foods. And that's food that is just cooked, preserved, engineered in a way, and it removes almost all nutrients from it except probably like protein. It's concentrated sugar, refined starches. It adds refined oils and a lot of salt, and it overrides the natural signal of what fullness is. And so they don't even, they don't even make us necessarily full. They continue us wanting more stimulated rewards, more dopamine hits, more food. I was listening to one person, was that Dr. Lyons person, and she was saying that there's this theory that's going around in the nutrition world that the reason we overeat when we eat ultra processed food so much is that our body has in mind a certain amount of protein we should have in a day. And when we don't get it, or it doesn't recognize it, it keeps saying, oh, well, eat some more. Maybe you'll get it the next thing. Maybe you'll get it the next thing, and it keeps trying to pressure us in order to get that protein in. And because either we're not getting the protein, or the protein is so processed, the body doesn't even recognize it as processed, it encourages us to eat more and more. And you could say, well, that's not really, the food company's fault that our bodies are sort of built in a different way. One of the things, I mentioned this a long time ago, back when news magazines were a big thing on television. I think it was Peter Jennings did this whole story about how there was a whistleblower working for the food industry. And they were talking in this paper about how France dislikes overweight people. And they're having a problem selling processed foods in France because the French people might buy a bag of potato chips, but they eat 3 chips and then they're done because they're so horrified about being overweight that they won't eat more chips, that they really monitor what they eat and the healthiness of what they eat. And this paper that was internal to the food company was talking about how can we bust down France's natural healthy eating urges. And I thought, what? So you do know that these foods aren't great for us. And not only that, you do know that there are ways of busting down people's healthy eating desire. And so it is, I'm not a conspiracy person, but I'm like, this does sound like a conspiracy. So what the food companies got together is they started doing ad buys on television shows and on, like public transportation, showing more overweight people in happy situations. And so they were talking about this whole plan that they had working together to bust down France's natural healthy eating. And I thought, well, that's downright awful, And so they do know, I think, that these foods aren't great for us. And what they're trying to do is to get us to buy more. That's their whole goal. And so that's why you kind of wonder why you see something like, I don't know, like jam, and it has salt in it. And you're like, why is there salt in my jam? And a lot of times salty things tend to bring back that sort of addicted feeling in us. And so, that's part of it. But anyway, just to get to the point that they're trying to sell food and they're not necessarily trying to make us healthy. And one guy described the ultra processed foods as not actually food anymore. They are some kind of a chemical supplement. They're not even food anymore. So again, if our body wants a certain amount of proteins and let's say carbs, because it knows the formula to make us live, that's the whole body's point, is to keep us living and keep us healthy, then when it sees something it just doesn't even recognize anymore as food, it may not satisfy. That's in the end what they think is wrong with diet sodas, and I call it pop, diet pop, but is that you get that taste of sweetness, and so the body goes, oh, okay, here comes sugar, and then sugar never comes, and so then it's just like, okay, I didn't get what I was expecting to get, I'm going to still want more. So it's sort of going into that situation where the body is looking for satisfaction and not getting it out of the foods that we have. So that's part of the processed food label is, are you still eating something that the body recognizes as protein, as carbohydrates, and it knows how to expect? Because the thing I think we're learning with the GLP-1, because someone asked the other very good question too, why is there GLP receptors in our brain? We thought this was a gut thing, that it was telling us it's full, that it's telling us how long we're going to process food for. That's why it's helping us work to lose weight. And then they find out that there's actually GLP receptors in our brain, all sorts of places. Why is that? And that is because that our hungerness and our eating satisfaction goes all the way from our throats, which tells the stomach, hey, this is what's coming down the pipe. Then our stomachs, which tells our intestines, hey, this is what I'm processing now. But then also our brains that says, this is what I got, or I'm satisfied. And then starts putting out, I think it's leptin to tell us that we're full, and ghrelin to tell us that we're hungry. And when we get divorced from the natural signals in our brain, suddenly we're overeating, and we no longer listen to our fullness information anymore. So the question is can we understand even the ingredients labels anymore? And that becomes really, really difficult. And they're not written a lot of times in ways that we can read it. Like I said, sometimes they read like a chemistry textbook. Let me just give you a quick short tip that I started doing is I started taking pictures of food labels, putting them in ChatGPT, and asking it to analyze the food. And it looks at the ingredients and it looks at the nutrition labels in it, and it gives a pretty decent illustration of what exactly is in this food. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute. Let me kind of give you some examples. So I kind of did a series for ChatGPT and decided to try to show it 4 different kinds of food and have it discuss it. So the first thing is, let's see if I can get this to work, is I have egg bagels. That's on the side. You can see the bagel sitting there. And I like egg bagels. They're one of my favorite things. I put them in the toaster oven and, throw a little cream cheese on them. And it's kind of a good snack for me, particularly when I'm having low blood sugar problems. It's been pretty good for me to get back to feeling normal again. And on the other side is the Nature Oven's keto bread that I've been eating all this time. And that's been a mainstay in my GLP experience because we want to get enough fiber so that we continue all the processes we should be doing here. So I asked ChatGPT to look at it and sort of do a comparison of these 4 different kinds of products, or these these are two of the products, and asked me, like, how can I analyze these products? How can I know what it is I should be eating? And the bottom line of it, it looked at the bagels and it said, well, this is a solid carb. There's not a lot of chemicals in it. It has one thing that is a mold preventer, and then it had another thing that was, some kind of a preservative in it. But I'm calling it he, said, this is bread. This is a very dense form of bread. It will spike your blood sugar. It will not give you, if you look at the food labels of it. Oh, let me get the other label up here on this. It doesn't really have much fiber in it. It doesn't have anything good or bad in it. And instead, it has a little bit of protein in it. But it's just kind of there. But it's all natural. You can read the ingredients just exactly like you want to read the ingredients. So I said, okay, great. Here is now my keto bread. So my keto bread is fantastic. It has 12 grams of fiber. It has 4 grams of protein. And it has not much in the way of actual nutrition itself. But when you look at the label itself, it has modified wheat. It has chicory. That's we call it in the Midwest ditchweed. But it's high in fiber. That's what gives all these breads fiber in them. And there's like potassium sorbate, which is a preservative, sorbic acid. There's things in there, and it's highly processed. And it said, on the other side, this has a lot of nutrition, the keto bread, or fiber in it, which is good for you. It's not going to spike your blood sugar because has a lot of fiber in it, which that won't. But it also could have unexpected digestive problems because it's not actually real food. It has been processed to heck and back, and it's not even really bread. There's a bread softener in there, so it has that sort of soft bread feel to it. And so it's good and bad. It's on one side not natural, but on the other side high in protein. While my egg bagel, more natural, but not a darn good thing in it, and so you're like, okay, well, I what do you do with that, right? So anyway, just to kind of show you some examples of food labels. Let me get rid of the other bagel picture. There we go. So that's just one example of it as well. Think about eggs. Eggs is a good example of it. I do like to eat eggs. I think that they're a good source of protein. I think they're a good source of choline. There's a lot of really good things in eggs, but we will cook them. And one of the things I started learning when I started going through this whole process is that how you cook an egg actually matters. And it matters to an extent about processing and heat. And so normally, like I said, eggs are high quality protein, a healthy fat. It has cholesterol in it. It has choline, which is good for the brain, and it has fat soluble vitamins in it. So overall, the egg itself is pretty darn good. But the idea is that when you poach or boil an egg, you retain most of or all of the nutrition on it. It's cooked at low temperatures. You have no added fats. Because how many of you have scrambled up eggs and put a ton of butter in them, put a lot of different things in that? And I watched someone make, pizza crust with broccoli and eggs. And boy, there was a lot of stuff in there. It's supposed to be healthy for you, but in the end, because of all the things they put in it, I think it was probably less healthy for you. So certainly, like I said, boiling and poaching it, really very good. But what happens then when we scramble or fry the egg? Certainly putting it in at lower heats is better for us. It keeps the nutrition loss down to a low roll here. Not putting butter or margarine in it or oil will help. And so I went and bought myself some very nice pans that are no-stick pans. And I don't have to put any butter in them. And I can scramble up a couple eggs, put a little salt and pepper in them, and they're great. So that's part of it. But high heat can be a problem with it, because what the high heat can do is cause oil oxidation, which is not good for us. It oxidizes the cholesterol, which makes it a little bit more easily available to our bad cholesterol that's in our bodies. And so you do that kind of thing. But most of us, can kind of cook eggs in a way that's sort of reasonable and not do that. But that's kind of teaches you an example of processed foods, is that it shows us that the egg didn't, change in any sort of way. An egg's an egg, but, cooking it. Same thing when we get back, to other foods. But just to kind of tell you that there are ways that you can process food that's okay, and there are ways that you can process food that either reduces the nutrition or completely strips them of nutrition or somehow causes oxidizing, which isn't good for us. So you like bread? Yeah, you'd eat bread. I eat. That's how I got to this weight. It was too much bread, too much noodles. I mean, I really like that, and but yeah, frying and scrambling eggs. Yeah, eggs are always very different for everyone, so it's kind of a funny thing how we like it. I know a lot of people who like egg yolks and then they stay away from the egg whites, and I'm not sure why, but I just sort of eat the whole egg. But I do know people that do that. And so when we look at, these processed foods, you think about like bread in the end isn't necessarily a problem, but refined flour can be. That you will consistently see bread in the grocery store that has no fiber in it. How does that happen? I remember once I saw it. What was it? It was like strawberry. It was supposed to be fresh strawberry preserves, and it didn't have one nutrient in it. And they processed the heck out of it. What about pizza? Think about pizza. So is pizza bad for us? The idea is that, it's kind of all sort of reasonable, right? You have a bread crust, you have spaghetti sauce, which is just tomatoes, you put a little cheese on it, okay, and then maybe you put some sort of a topping on it, whether it's vegetables or meat or something like that. And what's the problem with pizza? Well, store-bought pizza has a lot of saturated fats. That's usually a good source of where we're getting a lot of our saturated fats from. They may process the tomato sauce into something that doesn't even resemble tomato sauce anymore, and all the lycopene and all the nutrients out of it's gone. Depending on which cheese you get, like I said, cheese can become highly processed or the cheese can be okay. And the sausage, bacon, Zoe loves bacon, I know. I love bacon too, but that's like a whole kind of idea, is what are you putting on it and how much are you putting on it? And so in the end, pizza's not a problem, but what exactly is the pizza? So it's about reading the labels. And again, eggs aren't a problem. So this health thing that we're on isn't about purity in our own selves. We're not trying to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect. I think when I was listening, and I'll talk about him in just a minute, there was a fellow that I've been watching who talks a lot about processed foods. You can find him on YouTube. He said that most people in our Western world eat 80% highly processed food and 20% food that is not highly processed. And he just decided to switch that around, and now he tries to only eat 20% highly processed food. Here he is, the expert on how bad it is for us, but, of course, he's still going to eat some. And he even brought up this interesting point in the video, and I have a link in the show notes here to one of his videos, but he he said that if you work out with strength training and you have a good amount of muscles on you, and you do exercise and you cardio and you live a normally healthy life, that will protect you from most of the ills of highly processed foods. But if you are overweight, you don't exercise, you don't eat healthy, the processed foods will hit you particularly hard and bring in all the bad things that we don't want to have happen. Heart disease, diabetes, problems with our physical joints because we weigh too much. And so we can find some sort of a balance with that. He says you're never going to get rid of the highly processed foods. And he just wants you to learn about them. And he says once you start learning about them, you might not want them anymore. Because you'll start asking yourself about, when I look at a food, what does it feel like to eat this food? I'm not even full when I eat it. Does it even have any nutrients, of any fiber or protein in it? Is it a meal or a treat? We can have treats from time to time, and that is totally okay. And maybe instead of banning certain kinds of food, this is the direction I'm going, I'm now pairing foods with other foods. I used to eat big bowls of noodles. That was my go-to thing. And I loved it. It was my favorite meal. I still, on occasion, have a bowl of noodles, but it is a serving of noodle, which comes in usually at 2 ounces as compared to what I was eating before. I've cut back on the butter and what I put on the noodles, and now it's a side dish instead of the meal. So that's the important part of it. So instead of getting rid of some of these foods, just try to pair it with something else. We talked about this in a past edition too. It's usually more important that you eat your protein first, and then your protein processes the carbohydrates better after you've eaten protein. That's one way to do. And so the idea is that the pattern of this is: are you eating processed foods all the time, or are you just eating it once in a while? I think that's the direction you go, because food is not going to be a pass fail test for us, and we are going to always have foods for us that aren't particularly good for us. Our health is not built on healthy, perfect meals, but instead it's about repeatable, reasonable choices that we make day to day. On occasion, we're going to have something. Yesterday, I went out with my friend and I had mac and cheese because I come from the Midwest, and mac and cheese is a winter comfort food. But you know what I did? I ordered the smallest plate and I ate, and I made sure I kept checking in with myself. Am I full? Am I full? And I left some of it there. So I didn't even eat the whole piece of it. So remember, that when it comes to processed fruit, enjoy the meal, enjoy whatever it is you're eating, but do repeatable, 80%. 80% of your meals should be correct. And 20%, is just not going to be perfect. And so don't panic about food, but instead, get into the pattern of reading labels. And that's where I really do. And I told you before, I have some rules for myself. I came up with that the grams of sugar have to be under a certain percentage of the calories, that it has to have, if it's a carb, 3 grams of fiber in it, or I'm not even going to consider buying it. And if it reads like a chemical label, I don't buy that either, except for my keto bread, which has gotten me through this whole, GLP-1 situation. I look for foods with fiber. I look with foods that don't have much sugar, and some other flags on there. Like I said, they read like chemicals. But what's interesting about it is, do you see the word refined in it? Do you see not many natural things that you would see out of a farm? They are designed to be had too much. They are designed to overeat. If something has long shelf life, it has a ton of preservatives in it. And a lot of times it's engineered for taste and texture and craving. The guy who's the food expert was saying that you don't look at a chicken, or you don't look at a bowl of blueberries and it doesn't say on the blueberries naturally healthy, and it shouts out how good it is for you. The more a packaging shouts out how good it is for you, chances are it's a good clue that it is not good for you at all. Because real foods don't have to do that. These other foods are being sold to you by cartoon characters. They shout out, Cheerios, a natural part of your healthy diet. I'm not saying Cheerios are horrible for you, and in the cereal world, it's probably the least horrible, but it's still processed, highly processed food. And because it's shouting out all these things, it's not good for you. Yeah, avoid microwave meals. Yeah, me too. I'm with you there. I try to avoid as best I can. Some other examples: sugary breakfasts are things you should avoid. They are highly processed, low in grains, high in sugar, artificial flavors. I had to laugh, by the way. I drink those drink packets because I can't seem to get myself to drink water unless I have flavoring in it. And I noticed that because now we're starting to focus on artificial colors and dyes, they did change the artificial flavoring to natural flavors, which was good. I know that most of Europe has gotten away from some of the artificial flavorings and colorings that the United States is just drowning in. But it changed some of its language around to make it sound like the color dyes aren't so bad for you, but it's the same dye. I looked it up, and it's exactly the same dye. I don't know why they have to dye fruit, drinks. I suppose for kids, they think it's important. And, think about chips and puffs and crackers. Those tend to be refined starches, oils, and salt. They're designed for the crunch and fast eating. And hopefully you're going to bring the bag or the box out with you, and you're just not going to pay attention, and you're just going to keep eating. The foods disappear. Candies, sugars, those kinds of food for you. Yeah, natural. Yeah, even some of your sweets, yeah, and candies, you're using natural flavors and colorings, and I'm hoping that's the direction we go to in the United States more. Like I said, I don't really understand why my grape drink has to be purple. It doesn't really have to be purple. As long as it tastes good, I don't care what color it is, because I put them in. I don't know what color is in there, so it's not for anything good for that. Think about too, like burgers with sauces and fried chicken, the refined buns, the industrial oils and the sugar and the salt added again, and the cooking process. It's going to be ultra processed cooking there too. I wanted to get back and talk a little bit, because you could just sit there and drive this whole thing into the ground. But what you're looking for is essentially not refined oils, not sugar, little or no fiber, no nutrients in it, and ingredients, like I said, that you see in a cookbook. I found this kind of funny thing. I don't even know what food item this is. Let me see if I can show you. But it showed like the food item. I don't know what any of that stuff is. Gum-based mannitol. Yeah, carnauba wax? Is that what you put on your cars? I don't know. But anyway, like I said, you read a package and it's really pretty darn terrible, and you don't even know what it is anymore. And so I was just kind of looking at the labels. Let me take a look here at the last two labels that I kind of brought out for you, so that you can see raspberry flavor. Yeah, raspberry flavor. Why is it blue? Why is it blue raspberry? Because raspberries are not blue. Here's two more things that I like to eat. I don't eat much of, that I looked at the food labels. And again, all I did was take a picture, I showed it to ChatGPT, and I had it help me analyze this. And it told me some of the things. So it kind of gave me these two things. Now, the item in blue, that's from Trader Joe's, and they're little pancake puffs. And they kind of make it like a good little snack, and I don't have too many of them. But basically it said, okay, there's not a good thing in this. There's a lot of sugar in this. There's no dietary fiber. The ingredients are pretty good. Most of them read like actual real things. But there's not just one good thing in it. That's the idea. The thing on the other side is these biscottis. I even grabbed one right now because somehow I forgot to eat lunch. Let me get it. Yeah, so it's just a little biscotti thing, right? And the good news is that most of the things, again, look like natural things. It actually, ChatGPT was able to explain what some of these other things in it is. And it basically said the same thing about both of these. These are both going to be treats. They're going to be snacks. You keep them under a low roll. You don't eat a lot of them. In fact, I just have this one little thing, which I think, will come out to about 100 calories, if that. And I just have it every once in a while. It's not as bad as if you think like Oreo cookie or something that's highly processed. This reads mostly in English. And while it doesn't have any good nutrients in it, it's okay to have as a treat. So I guess that kind of helps you balance, because in the end, we want to stay full. We want to give nutrition to our bodies so that our bodies are staying healthy. We want to be able to, if we go to the gym, if we don't eat the right kinds of food, we could go to the gym all day long and we're not going to build muscle because it doesn't have the raw materials it takes to build muscle. The other side of things is that and I'll take all these things off of here, is that if we eat the wrong kinds of food, all the bad cholesterols and everything else like that, it does have the ingredients to make. And so we can make ourselves a little healthier, unhealthier by what we eat. So I think if you're enjoying food, enjoy food. If you're enjoying a snack, have a snack. But you're going to do it less often. You're going to put it back into the proper, like I said, snack perspective. If you're never going to get away from processed food. I mean, and I think that's why we sort of trying to get away from that word, because I think we don't normally mean, that anymore. What we're looking for is, does a food have actual innate value to it, or does it have actual innate danger to us? And try 80% of the time to go towards the more minimally processed foods that are still there for us. And you know, like I said, you start going towards the frozen vegetables. Even canned vegetables and fruits aren't bad for you. Rolled oats, yogurt. How much, yogurt is a big controversy. How much sugar is in yogurt? One of the things is I went to Iceland a couple of years ago and I loved their yogurt. Their yogurt was so good over there. And then I was excited to get back to my grocery store and see that they had the same brand in my own grocery store as they did in Iceland. And then I bought some and I'm like, oh, this doesn't really taste the same. And so I looked at the nutrition labels from the ones in Iceland compared to the one I bought at my home. And guess what? They said, oh, this is going to an American market. Let's put 3 times as much sugar in it. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, why? Why would you do that to me? And so I think, getting back into the reading labels, that's the idea. We just want to do better. We're not going to do perfectly. So I don't know if there's any questions out there or anything that you do in order to eat a more healthy diet. I know that you mentioned in the audience that you're not a fan of the processed foods and microwave meals. Yeah, a lot of those microwave meals, they're concocting so that they microwave up nicely. But by doing that, they're ending up putting a lot of stuff in them that aren't particularly good for us. And so it's a little bit more work too. And I'm not saying that you have to go out there and trap your own caribou or whatever it is you're going to do. But the idea is that, like I said, I just tried to look at food that resembles something that I could find on a farm. That's, in the end, that's really what I'm shooting for. I hope that helps. If you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the channel. You can always email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. And I love seeing you. I appreciate y'all being in the audience. I'm just trying to, get to a place where I'm sort of eating, just better. Because again, like most of you, I'm just afraid of putting back on all the weight. Now that I've lost 80 pounds, I'm afraid of putting that weight back on, as many of you are. And boy, I would love to get to this point where I can eventually drop off of GLP-1s. I hope that that's the case. And I hope it's not going to be next week because my insurance got denied or something like that. You said in the audience you discovered that UK versions and US versions are tailored, for each country. You're right. It was interesting. I spent a couple of weeks in England. I walked the Cotswold Way, and we would buy things that we would have in the United States. And I was like, well, this is weird. It doesn't taste like what I'm used to it tasting like. Why did it taste like that? And it turns out because they are entirely different food products. We are getting different food products. And so when these food companies sort of complain and say, oh, well, we can't take out the coloring in the food, and we can't do this and we can't do that. You know what? They're giving the rest of the world different food than what we're getting in the United States. And I think this is a real problem that we are not, there are ways of making food differently and we're just not getting it. And I'm just going to leave it there. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Appreciate you watching. And I hope you have just a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.